Here we go. Jake and Josh are here to analyze the game they love for the team they love. This is another Dolphins podcast. Here's your host, Jake Mendel and Josh Houtz.
Thanks for tuning into another edition of another Dolphins podcast. We have some 2015 draft picks to talk about. Joshua Houtz, you feeling a little old today?
I feel old every day when I come on here and talk about the Dolphins with you, Jake. So that'll be no different. So yeah, let's talk 2015. Let's talk about the Dolphins, and we do have actually some news to discuss. So hope everyone had a good Easter. Hope you had a good weekend, Jake. And now we're back on the grind, right? Getting ready to talk about the thing we love, the Miami Dolphins. How you doing today, dude?
I'm doing pretty good. Easter weekend is in the books. I hope you're all out there a little chocolate wasted. Despite being 29 years old, I actually love making Easter baskets. The aesthetic of it is always fun. So, Josh, if you ever need help in that department, be sure to hit me up and let me know about that. But, man, I got to tell you, I'm super excited that this news came out. Raheem Mostert, the 31-year-old running back in an era where you do not pay running backs. Joshua Houtz, his contract was set to expire following the 2024 season, but it was reported over the weekend the Dolphins are going to keep him around a little bit longer, signing him to a one-year extension, working out the deal a little bit. You're not going to win games on April 1st, but seeing Raheem Mostert, 9-year NFL veteran, undrafted, cut by so many teams, to see him get this chance after leading the league in rushing touchdowns, to know that he's penciled in to not only play 10 seasons, but 11 seasons now, that's a pretty cool story, man.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it just goes to tell you. I mean, you hear it when you're growing up, right? Anybody can achieve their goals if they, work hard enough, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, Raheem Mostert embodies that, right? He was undrafted, like you said, bounced around all throughout the league. And now we're talking in 2023, just led the league in rushing, right? 209 carries, 1,012 yards, led the league with 21 total touchdowns. We saw his best football last year. And after that, it kind of makes sense to ink him to that long-term deal. I just say here, though, Jake, and I continue to look at the Dolphins running back room and have to laugh because when you add up all of their salary combined, I still don't know what the Dolphins would have done if they would have made that Jonathan Taylor trade, right? I mean, they were ready to pay him infinite buku money. They were ready to get the draft picks, and you would have given up all the running backs you have, to equate to that contract. So it's just crazy to think about all the different pieces the Dolphins offense has and just how talented Raheem Mostert was last year. I mean, I think you mentioned it, 2-year extension, or I guess total, it's a 2-year deal worth $9 million, I think in total. Mm-hmm. You're set to make $3.36 million this year. None of that was guaranteed. I think this new deal gives him some guaranteed money and again, locks him up through the 2025 season. So you're talking about me being old. This is a 31-year-old running back that's playing his best football. And that's kind of an anomaly in today's day. So you got to love the story with Raheem Mostert. Got to love what you saw last season and got to love honestly, the relationship him and Mike McDaniel had, because that's his man. And it seems like he's going to go to bat for him, through thick and thin. And it shows. So Raheem Mostert stoked. We as Dolphin fans should be stoked. And we're not going to hang banners like you said, but for everything Chris Greer's done this season, just chalk this up as another, small little W that we're going to look at in September, and November and think, damn, this is a good piece that the Dolphins locked up.
And that is the biggest key here, Josh. I don't know. Are you in a Dynasty league?
Yeah.
So I'm in a 2
one.
QB Dynasty league, and I'm not going to try to get too up in arms about it, but I had Raheem Mostert. And I just traded him, and this is going to sound terrible, for 2 third-round picks. I was under the impression, and I'll give you the reasoning. I didn't have any picks. I mortgaged it. I finished second in the league, so I made the push. The CD and Dak stack was just way too much for me to overcome. Needed more from Tyreek Hill. Was hoping that week 17 game he'd somehow go over 2,000 yards, but that wasn't the case. So I traded Mostert because I was under the impression that you got Devon Achane, man. 7 yards per carry. This dude is lightning in a bottle. The Dolphins are going to find more ways to get him involved. And then, you realize that this was a team that was $50 million over the salary cap 2 months ago. And I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but Jeff Wilson's still on the roster. Like, when you're going through and you're kind of like pulling apart the roster of different ways to reconstruct what's happening, we kind of assumed that Jeff Wilson would be kind of let go in that process, but that hasn't happened. We also have a room that includes Salvon Ahmed. He's still there. Jeff Wilson, I just mentioned, is there. And Raheem Mostert. How does understanding that room and hearing this contract extension kind of adjust your mindset at all? Because for me, it kind of was a kick in the butt because I thought I nailed it. I thought I did the Bill Belichick, get rid of a guy the year too early instead of a year too late. But all of a sudden, it does kind of set up like this 2024 season. I think the Dolphins are going to still kind of lean on Mostert as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, I still don't think that's a terrible trade, right? I mean, I think what you did and your thought process behind it's fine. I mean, you mentioned Jeff Wilson. If he didn't restructure, right, he probably would have been given the boot by now. So I think that's kind of why he's hanging around.
Good point.
But yeah, man, I think what this says about the running back room, like you mentioned, it says that they think the world. I guess Raheem Mostert, they wanted to give him that money, and I've written down he is the RB1, right? I mean, we sit here and we say there's no true bell cow. We kind of sit here, we can pat ourselves on the back now, but leading up to the year, Jake, you and I said a couple times, a lot of these fantasy experts like Jeff Wilson over Raheem Mostert. We didn't understand that. We were right. We were right with that. So, I guess maybe they just want to continue to have Raheem Mostert to lean on, right? To give the ball to, who can, let's be honest, he put on some weight last year. He looked bigger, stronger. And we don't want to see Devon Achane go down. We want to have a Devon Achane play a full season. So as much as we want to see him get more touches, having a guy like Raheem Mostert, keep the balance in line and maybe give him the same amount of touches that we saw last season, maybe, gets worked into the passing game a little bit more. I think it opens opportunities up there, but there's really no loss here. This is a win-win situation, in my opinion, bringing back Raheem Mostert. And I guess the only question I have now is there any way possible the Dolphins are going to seek out another running back? I mean, we all like Chris Brooks. We joke he's our baby Derrick Henry, but besides an undrafted acorn or something like that, I mean, you have to think this unit's pretty much set after they re-signed Ahmed, like you mentioned, the restructure of Wilson, now this. And I got to feel pretty good about this running back unit, to be honest, after what they did last season. Wasn't it first in the league with 5.1 yards per carry? I mean, yeah, I'm happy with Raheem Mostert, man. Run, Raheem Mostert, run.
The one thing I'm a little, I don't want to say queasy about, but Josh, he did put the ball on the ground 4 times last year. He only turned it over once, so it's not a huge issue, but I mean, bounces a different way. You feel a little different. I was really surprised on how little they used him as a receiver. You saw early in the season, and I think one of the most underrated aspects of Raheem Mostert, well, I got 2. One, it seems like 1 out of every 4 or 5 plays, he just lands the meanest stiff arm on someone and just sends them to the shadow realm, which is always for someone like Raheem Mostert, this humble surfer dude who plays this stretch version of football. The fact he's going to take your face and shove it amount of dirt, that's always pretty fun to see. And number 2, it was Mr. Raheem Mostert is always so injury prone. He's missed, let me see here, 3 games in 2 years for the Dolphins. And when you talk about the contracts and value, that is absolutely excellent. But you mentioned the receiving game, 25 receptions on 32 targets, 7 yards per reception. I did think he had a couple drops. That is the one area where when I look at this receiving group, Josh, I do think there's a little left to be desired unless I break out the tinfoil hat and say Devon Achane's going to be taking most of those receptions from everyone else.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't be upset if Devon Achane continued to get some of those, targets in the passing game. But when we talked about it, end over end, Jeff Wilson was one of those guys that was cutting into those targets, and we don't need to see that, right? So I think I written down 25 receptions, 175 yards last year. I mean, I think you and I can both agree we could see more out of Raheem Mostert in that aspect. But again, it's impressive as hell what he's become, because at one point we sat here and talked about speed back, and you mentioned it. He's stiff arming dudes. I know we all remember that Buffalo game where he broke off that big run where it just reminded you of old school Ricky Williams or Jay Ajayi. I mean, he's stepping into his own, and I'm excited to see what 33-year-old Raheem Mostert can do, because his best football was last season.
So, Josh, I figured we would wrap up this segment by playing a little game of just simple fandom. We're going to rank our favorite Miami Dolphins running backs in the last 20 years. I mean, you kind of hit on it, seeing the Raheem Mostert contract extension. It just makes you happy. It speaks volumes to kind of the type of guy he is, the type of player he is. So, Joshua Houtz, this or that as a Dolphin fan? Who is higher up? And this isn't a game of hate. I don't want you to overthink it. Who is higher up on your ladder? Raheem Mostert, Reggie Bush.
Damn, that's kind of, I was going to say that's, oh man, I don't know, man. That's even to me. That's dead on even. I'm telling you, if there was anybody you would have said, those 2 guys are pretty much neck and neck. I don't know that I have a favorite. Who would you, come on, you tell me yours. You have to have a favorite in there, right? Aren't you a Reggie Bush boy?
I like 2006, his first year, I was in 6th. So I literally grew up watching this dude just owning every SportsCenter top 10. So
we all loved him in college. Yeah.
Dude, love him in college. You love him in the NFL until he spends a year with the Bills and he finishes with -3 yards. That's what you get for going to the Bills, first of all, Reggie Bush. So I do think I overvalue him, or there's a little extra magic just growing with him. But I think I'm past it, dude. I think Raheem Mostert, as surpassed it. I'm surprised you're on that level with Bush, because I thought for sure you'd be like, Bush was great, but it was only 2 years. So I'm happy that the lore of Reggie Bush lives on in such a positive light.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit torn there. I was going to go with Mostert, but I just couldn't do that for Reggie Bush. I still remember dropping. I played my buddy who was a Raiders fan when he was on the Saints and Madden, and I dropped like 500 or 600 yards on him with Reggie Bush. So he holds a special place in my heart. But I think he has that special place to you, similar to what Jay Ajayi has for me. Because I would have put Jay Ajayi. I'm sure you're going to ask me, but I would have said Jay Ajayi over Raheem Mostert, which, let's be honest, that's absolutely crazy. But there's something about Jay Ajayi that I liked in college. Whether it was drinking the pickle juice, the dreads, how hard he ran. I would put him above Raheem Mostert. What can I throw that one at you? I mean, you have to have a preference between.
That was my next question for you. Was Jay Ajayi? I mean, you consider he was with the team for 3 years. 2 of the 3 seasons he did start less than 10 games, but that 2016 season, he literally carried this team to the playoffs. The defense was absolutely dreadful. In 15 games, he had 260 carries, 1,272 yards. The J Train averaged 4.9 yards per carry. 8 touchdowns, a long of 62, 60 first downs, an absolute stud. However, I think personally, again, this isn't like a hate and trying to bash. I think I'd put Mostert ahead just because I think his personality and the vibes of him on your team. Don't get me wrong, Ajayi had that. Did you watch the was it the Wizards game? It was Kelly Oubre the other night where it was at the end of the game and he was basically just swearing off every ref, just one after one, pointing at him, just basically going to town. Ajayi had that no F's given type of attitude, which I totally respect. But I mean, the vibes of Raheem Mostert, the surfer dude, his ability to stay on the field, I think I'd have him slightly above.
Yeah, I think if we're being honest, I mean, I think Raheem Mostert wins both of those right now, but I think I have to give Jay Ajayi that little push because I don't know if people know this, but I went down for the Titans game in 2016. Dolphins got absolutely murked, and then the next week we stayed down for the Steelers game, and all the Steelers fans were in town, and that was the one where Jay Ajayi just went ballistic against the Steelers. So that's the only reason I have a special place in my heart for him. But Raheem Mostert, what he means to this team, what he's done for this team, means more than either of those guys so far. Who else you got on your list, Jake?
I got one more about Jay Ajayi. What's his birthplace, Joshua?
London or something like that. No,
it says England.
somewhere over there. Yeah.
The last person I have on my list for running backs in the last 20 years, Joshua, Raheem Mostert. He's going to spend 4 seasons in Miami. He started his career in Miami. Does that match former first-round pick Ronnie Brown?
I'm glad you didn't go with Ricky because Ricky, I think that's
Ricky's
pretty
above.
obvious.
And shout out Merrick for getting him back on the pod. Your kids obviously love Ricky Williams too. But shout out Merrick for getting Ricky Williams on. Dude, I see the Ricky jersey behind you, and if you're not watching the pod, 560 WQAM YouTube channel. But yeah, I wasn't going to do that to you. Ricky is just such an important figure in Miami Dolphins lore. That, he's on a tier of his own. Had to throw in Ronnie Brown. This one's tougher, a lot tougher, I'd say, in terms of if you wanted to side with Mostert, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean, again, no disrespect to Mostert, but I feel like I don't know how my life would be without those Wildcat years, right? I mean, like those are those vivid memories that you'll always remember no matter how bad the Dolphins have been. I mean, that gimmicky offense and the way we ran it down the Pats' throat that first game. So, damn, again, I want to say it's Raheem Mostert, but I'm probably going to lean Ronnie Brown, and that just makes me a little bit of a jerk. So what about you, Jake?
You don't no reason to not hate on the present. Josh, you're reaching 40 years old. You can be the curmudgeon. You can yell at clouds. If you want to say that Jay Ajayi is your GOAT and that him going to Philly was one of the worst things that ever happened, let that flag fly, man. Ronnie Brown's a tough one because you look at it. 1, 2, 4 seasons with over 200 carries. He averaged 5.1 yards per carry in 7 games in 2007. That Wildcat year was just so impressive. 10 touchdowns. But that 2010 season, man, 16 games played, 200 carries, 734 yards, 3.7 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns, 3 fumbles. I think there could be a debate to be had here if Mostert has another good season. And of course, it's important to keep in mind this dude had 18 rushing touchdowns last season, which led the NFL. And Ronnie Brown, his career high was 10 rushing touchdowns. I think you'd have to give it to Ronnie Brown right now, but I do think you can make a case for Raheem Mostert, especially if he has that one more good season in Miami. Like I think we both know he can. In one of the wildest transitions you will get today, Joshua Houtz, from one undrafted 2015 college free agent to another, Kendall Lamm is back in Miami. He signed a 1-year deal to return to the Dolphins. It was kind of funny because Lamb stepped in and was absolutely awesome last year. That's not awesome. That's just flat out serious. He meant business on the football field. 4 sacks allowed, over 613 snaps. But it's funny because when Teron Armstead, he's due to miss a couple games every year. It's just how his body operates. Everyone was like, yeah, we got this up and comer, Kendall Lamm to step in. He was drafted just a few years ago by the Houston Texans. Well, he was undrafted in 2015, which usually those aren't the players that kind of get you jazzed up. But Josh, I think all this offseason, the one thing we thought the Dolphins could have challenged finding is a backup for Teron Armstead. He restructured his contract to return to Miami, and there's no doubting when Armstead's on the field, he's one of the league's best left tackles. To be able to have a backup like Kendall Lamm, who apparently it didn't break the bank, knowing that Dolphins only had about $5 million in cap space to work with, knowing you have a veteran 32-year-old to back up Teron Armstead, that's a pretty sweet gig, man.
Yeah, and I don't know what those things are technically called that you have at like kids' birthdays that you blow on them and they're like, brr, you know what I mean? Like those little. Do they have a technical term?
Kazoo with a balloon on it, kind of.
Okay, yeah, balloon kazoo thingy, but you know what I mean. I feel like we should have those right now, or we should be smoking a cigar because we were waiting for this Kendall Lamm signing, and he's probably going to get like league minimum or something like that. But again, when you mentioned the fact that Teron Armstead is going to miss games, the fact that he can come in there and has proven that he can fill in, and seemingly we didn't really miss a beat. So I love this signing. I'm so glad that we had this happen before we came on here. But you're not gonna. Maybe you're not going to go out in the town tonight and celebrate a Kendall Lamm signing, but if we're looking late in the season in December and you don't have Teron Armstead, you're going to be happy that you have Kendall Lamm to fill in there. So intrigued to see what he made, or how I think it's a 1-year deal, but we've been calling for this week after week. They brought in Jack Driscoll, they brought in some other guys, so the offensive line is starting to shape up, and you just wonder, Jake, is this Chris Greer's way of having a plan in place in case they don't get a tackle? If they don't target one in round 1 or 2. I mean, he loves to have those little, and I know that sounds silly, right? Kendall Lamm's not going to stop you from drafting a generational tackle or anything like that, but it gives you flexibility and allows you to look elsewhere if you have to. So, love the signing. Glad it happened before we came on here. And we can celebrate Kendall Lamm signing because he will probably play at least a game this season if history has told us anything.
I promise you it will be a lot more than a game too. I'd be willing to put some money on that one. And we started out early in free agency kind of assuming that Kendall Lamm was going to be a goner, right? You saw how abysmal teams like the Jets were last year, and they're all mostly because of their offensive line. You thought that some team, all right, Kendall Lamm, we'll make it look like a 2-year deal where it will really be kind of a beefed up 1-year deal because, you were good in Miami for a couple seasons here. But as time goes on, money starts to dry up. It was actually a little surprising to see Lamm not get signed, so it's exciting to see him coming back to Miami. Hopefully you're working around that league minimum type deal. That way it doesn't impact the compensatory pick formula. Right now, the Dolphins are scheduled to have 2 third-round picks and a 7th-round pick. But you make a great point, Josh, and I think it's a nice one to wrap up on today's show. Chris Grier is positioning the team to go, quote unquote, best player available during the draft. I think one of the leapfrog scenarios that sticks out to me, I think we talked about it before, but when Denver leapfrogged Miami to take Javonte Williams, at running back in front of the Dolphins. And that was because I think it was pretty clear the Dolphins had a huge need at running back. I think this is Grier's one. He's doing that. 2, you're adding a great backup left tackle. However, Josh, don't you still think they should add another lineman, maybe 2 more linemen in the draft?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was sitting there laughing because I was sitting there saying how, this gives them flexibility there in the first round, but I don't think you bring Kendall Lamm back is going to stop you from doing that. So it's same way with center, right? And, so the kids are hyped up for this Kendall Lamm signing, but yeah, man. And just to go back to the whole, filling in these little needs, I think there's a rumor going around now from The Athletic that the Dolphins have interest in Tyler Boyd, the receiver. Again, that's a position the Dolphins may want to try to, plug in with that sealant that you always talk about. So some signings that are still going to come, but I'm liking the way this thing's shaping up after, how doom and gloom we felt those first few days of free agency. I mean, I was ready to just, give up a little bit.
I do think it's worth noting, Chris Greer is going to be in on every conversation. He's great for guys like us who want something to talk about. But I genuinely think like this is just Chris Greer doing his due diligence, and if that means it needs to be like shared, like if it needs to be shared via a source, he does not seem to care. I do think this is a scenario where the Dolphins are just quote unquote checking in. I don't think something's going to happen. I think we need to look at more focus on the mindset that the Dolphins had in the Jalen Ramsey trade, right? There's different ways to manipulate the cap. They don't mind giving players maybe position resetting contracts, different things like that. But Greer settled at a 3rd-round pick and Hunter Long for Jalen Ramsey. Do you know how insane that sounds to say out loud? Hunter Long and a 3rd-round pick for Jalen Ramsey. So I think this is Chris Greer's way of working, right? He's going to go as low as he can go. And if you say no, he's going to walk away. Tyler Boyd it'd be interesting. It'd be a fun signing. But I just don't think it'd be a move that kind of maximizes Miami's cap space to the highest degree.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it almost seems like they're just reaching out to some, options that could be a number 3 wide receiver. They asked Odell Beckham Jr. I'm sure they lowballed him. He said, how low can you go? I just picture you at a wedding, right? And you're doing the limbo. How low? And that's just Chris Greer. Chris Greer is trying to get these guys at his number. So they're checking in on Tyler Boyd. I mean, that's a guy who he's a solid, what was he, number 2, number 3? I guess he was number 3 there in Cincinnati. He's solid, but you want him if you're going to bring him in again at your price. So we'll see what comes of that. I mean, we're going to continue to hear them linked, like you said, to every single person on the trade market, as we've heard. And then, any free agent at a position that they could potentially need. And that's just a Chris Greer way, and we should become used to it, right? I mean, that's just what we're used to now at this point. Every player that there's a rumor that they're going to be traded or signing a big free agent, the Dolphins are involved, whether there's some truth to that or not.
Shout out to Merrick once again before we wrap up for doing another podcast with Ricky Williams. That dropped on Easter morning, our little gift to you. So if you have not checked out that yet, please go and do so. We have some more interviews planned for this week. We are very excited. One, we should have Friday, and then we'll have Cap back on Saturday or so to talk defensive tackles in the draft class. A lot is happening, despite there being any football games, Joshua, and I'm fired up. So let's go check our pulses. Thank you all so much for listening to another Dolphins podcast. Thank you all for joining us. We will talk to you soon, but until next time, fins up.
Fins up.